Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have a beautiful positional game to share with you. This was played at the Champions Chess Tour Final 2024 on December 18th. On the white ends, Magnus Carlsen playing against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Time controls are rapid, 10 minutes with a 2-second increment. Dark square bishops compete for the same diagonal. This point's reinforced with a pawn. And we have a same sides castles game. Early imbalance in this one, a light square bishop for knight exchange. Black now hints at forming a pawn duo. That's shut down. And black says, fine, if I can't get in e5, I'll go one step and at least stay strong on the light squares, taming the unopposed bishop. Knight c3, a5, and queen c2. There's no threat here of a4. That will frequently be a knee-jerk reaction, I should say, to a5 is frequently a3, preparing to meet a4 with b4. But in here, a4 is not a disruptor for this structure for as long as the knight is around there. It'd just be knight takes pawn. Knight a6, rook on f to d1. This isn't scary. Queen e2, eventually the knight will be kicked away. Queen e7, a3 only now. And similar to rook e8, supporting an e-pawn advance, or a pawn advance, we have rook b8, supporting now b5. Rook a to c1, b5 sure enough. And the tension remains for just another move. We have a knight reposition. Its dream square is d3, right behind this pawn. From here, knight d7 is played. Computer also points out you can first initiate an exchange on c4, and by playing in this way, black ensures that this point is a hole, and now it wants to go for an idea like this. But you can also play it with knight d7 first. Carlsen at this stage initiates an exchange before c4 can become a hole. C takes, otherwise the c pawn will fall. White continues to improve, eyeing up d3, and let me throw this position to you as a pop quiz. How would you continue here? Feel free to pause the video. All right, this is where black takes a step in the wrong direction, ends up playing b4. In the computer's eyes, it says best is a4. How does this play out after a4? Well, what's the point of a4? It's looking to carve out a square for the knight. Wants to get at this c4 square. So if you respond to a4 with b4, I'd already be preferring black right around here. Knight on b6, c4. Black's getting to that sensitive square c4 a bit sooner than a white knight is, the c5 square. How would white respond to a4? What's considered best? It says best is to take on a4 twice. And now here's a tricky detail, sort of computer chess here. The idea is not to take the bishop. The follow-up would be queen takes knight, and white is up a healthy passed a-pawn. The trick here is to take advantage of this pin on the bishop, saying you take my knight, I take your bishop, hit your rook, and then recapture. In the other detail, if you move your queen, it's saying the knight is going to be a real pest on this b3 square. All right, a bit of a computer line there, kicking off with a4 in this position. In the game, it's b4, and this gives white about a +1. And from here on out, it's a slow positional improvement. Really beautiful display here in this rapid format. Now, without question, the best way to respond to b4, the move in the game, a4. White is not so quick to allow this knight that's on the edge a wonderful outpost on b4. From here, knight b6, and now attention to detail. This knight wants to go to d3, but not so fast. This queen is not really ideally placed to being the leader along this open file. Queen e2 here throws a punch. Black goes on the defensive. Only now do we have knight to d3. This is a dangerous idea. Black does not want to see a knight arrive on c5, does not want to see white obtain a passed c-pawn. Black plays knight d7 here, competes for that c5 square. Computer says you could go ahead and try and work around a passed c-pawn. It says compete for the c-file, allow the knight to drop in, and try and work around this pawn, but this is a really dangerous situation, I would say, for black. Queen b5, pressure here, maybe a pivot there. Not a wise choice, I'd say, to give white a passed c-pawn. Really sensible to simply cut out the knight jump altogether. That's what we have in knight d7. From here, rook c6. We get one rook exchange. And queen c2. White maintains control over the only open file. From here, rook d8. Pop quiz. How would you continue here? What's your way to improve your position? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, there's a serious threat here for black. This is not a moment for white to, for instance, say, this flight square h2 could maybe be under control one day with these, the queen or the bishop. Let me get another flight square as an option. Now is not the time for some g3, king g2 stuff, because black would now be winning with knight d to b8. And this rook, which has a lot of options, is now trapped. All the squares taken away. There's a fancy move white could play here based on this pin, but that would be short-lived. Queen gets out of the way. This is back on. Another little fancy move with knight c5. We don't take. We just address the threat on the queen. Queen a7 here, and this rook will soon be won. So, in short, now is not time for a move like g3. In this game, top move, one that keeps about a +1 advantage here for white, it's queen c1. I really like this move. When I initially saw it, its main purpose right now, open up a square for the rook. We'll see an additional point for that queen later. Knight d to b8 follows. We're cool with the rook. So right now, these guys, without question, are better than black's. Major piece, white's major pieces outshine black's major pieces. This knight, neither of these knights can compete with this guy here. This is the dream square for this guy. Now, if we look at the bishops, this light square bishop isn't really doing a whole lot. It's biting on a rock. In fact, both of these king bishops are not really so productive. These are well-supported center pawns. We need to improve this guy here. It eventually goes to e2. What's going on with this guy here? It seems, maybe on the surface, to be a dead piece. It's only staring at a pawn. That may be one train of thought. But it is, in fact, a productive piece in combination with this guy. Once this guy jumps into one of these two squares, this guy can easily spring to life. A knight on c5, takes, there you go, open diagonal. And even with a knight jumping in here, some capture, chop, chop, a square opens up here on d4, where it functions really well. It'll be a two-directional bishop and a well-supported bishop on a secure square, supported by a pawn. That's a convenient defender. So some work still for the light square bishop, but everything else looking really good here for Team White. From here it is knight d7, bishop e2, sure enough, restriction placed on the black queen. Don't go too far, you might lose a knight. bishop f8, from here knight e5, and there's a serious threat now by white to dive in to c6. This is not a moment for black to say, I don't like that you control this only open file. I'm going to try and compete for it. I'm going to play knight b6 and then rook c8. No, that's going to fail because knight c6 is there and the a pawn will next fall. Also, taking the knight, not so attractive because this bishop has a fantastic square on d4. So black runs in reverse. And let me throw this position to you as a pop quiz. How would you continue here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, so far, a lot of talk here on the queen side. Now it's kingside play. H-pawn advances once, twice, and where do we go from here? He's not going with another pawn move. He's keeping his options open. He may want to take, he may want to push. Both are extremely disruptive ideas for white. It is best to keep those options open. Possible sacrifice on g6. 2 attackers, 2 defenders. h6 would say goodbye, flight square, and beware, black, of your back rank. There'd be a big problem once h6 is in there for as long as the major pieces are still around. Dangerous position here for black. Now, if these are 2 wonderful options, why doesn't maybe black take on h5? That would be crazy. You could just take the pawn right back and be generating a threat here. Even if white wasn't in a position to get the material right back, it's already super scary to play in that way, exposing the king like this. Uncomfortable situation for black for as long as white maintains this tension. Where do we go from here? It is knight c7, and now a beautiful follow-up here. e4. So this earlier queen c1 move, primary function, create a new square for that rook. It was vulnerable, it was ready to be trapped. Now we're seeing another point much later on. e4 paves the way for the queen to now pounce on this g5 square. And what would she be doing from there? Targeting the rook and hinting at sacrifices on g6. There'd be 3 attackers, still only 2 defenders. What does black play here now after this clearance sacrifice, paving the way for queen g5? It's bishop captures knight here. Now, if black responds here with knight d7 or the capture on e4, white can continue in the same way. So let's have a look at the pawn capture. Here we go. Chop on g6, and the queen arrives on g5 with this beautiful double attack. Say black saves the rook. Here we go. We get to see the sacrifice on g6. We get to see a benefit in keeping the pressure on g6, keeping those 2 options open with that small little pawn. This is now a broken position. Mate nearby on f7. And how do you defend it? If you move the knight to open up the queen's eyes, the queen would in fact be overloaded. 2 jobs here. Rook takes rook, and then mate. Also, the position is so bad, I should point out here for black. It's suggesting bishop h2 check, just so the king can make a mad dash towards the d6 square. If the king tries to bolt right now, check this one out, we would have splat. Pick your favorite way to recapture, who cares? Mate on e8. All right, these sacrifices on the g6 square, this queen g5 idea is really dangerous. Black understands this. He says, let me just get rid of that knight. At least I don't have to worry about now a sacrifice on this square. At the same time, white now is in possession of the bishop pair. From here, knight e8, queen g5, rook c8, rooks are off, capture on d5. In the game, black recaptures on d5. What's happening if this queen tries to go into Pac-Man mode? What if she goes into c2 to target these two unprotected bishops? This is how white can follow. Do similar with the queen targeting these knights. Interesting variation here. I want to touch on each briefly, both captures. If queen takes light square bishop, the queen's taking this knight. There's a check you could throw in, another check, and here's one way to put this bishop on a stable square, and now you're ready to track down the knight, take on f7, go hunting for the king. There is no perpetual check here for black. Another variation, the one where the black queen takes the other bishop, this guy here. Yet again, the knight falls, and you can already afford this capture here. You could already afford to give up the light square bishop. Check you would block. If this guy is picked up, this guy is winning this passed e6 pawn. You go to the corner, it's mate. You go here, you just have to be a little bit careful as white not to run too soon. First, take up a nice post by the queen, and this ducks any possibility of a perpetual check, establishing this post with the queen here. If king takes pawn, we're ready to go. Advance, there's no follow-up check on h5 if the king is occupying h5. Also, if g5, you could insert a check here, force the king there, and you're yet again ready to go with e7. One final variation, just to highlight the strength of this guy right here, keeping these options open. If you go back here, it'll be mate in 3. h6 check, king in the corner, mate. And if king g8, we have a check here, and pick your favorite, mate in 1 next. You have 3 options. All right, in this one, we do not see the black queen try to go into Pac-Man mode. It's the simple recapture on d5. And now we improve the light square bishop. Stable square for the bishop. Pressure on the knight. Restriction on the queen. Knight c6 from here. And now h6. Notice, at this stage, no knight around on e5 exerting pressure on g6. No possible sacrifice, really, on g6. Bishop is not focused on that point. Forget about the sacrifice at this stage. It's now much more clear what this h-pawn should do. Goodbye, flight square. Beware back rank. From here, queen e6. And now this queen returns to the queen side. Beautiful play here. Both sides of the board. Knight under fire. Where do you go now? In the game, it's a7. If you go to e7, that hangs the knight. If you take this pawn, well, it's a poison pawn. There would follow queen e3. Knight is hit twice. What are you supposed to do? If you move the knight, we exchange queens and win a knight. You support a knight, white takes advantage of the pinned knight. So, in this game, after the return of the white queen on c1, the knight goes to a7. Queen improves. Knight c8. If knight captures bishop, we're definitely taking with a pawn and working with a passed b pawn. Knight c8 here. And now g3. No rush. Time taken out. King security. Comfortable square on g2 off of the back rank. We only have to worry about a diagonal check one day. We got a couple pieces there that can help us out defending the diagonal. From here, g5. Maybe at some point, you could finally get rid of this dangerous h6 pawn, not right away. Queen still has a responsibility. Multiple responsibilities. Queen e3, immediately targeting the vulnerable point. F6 is the try here. Many ways forward, many winning approaches here. Queen d4 in this game. If queen takes pawn, we exchange queens. Yet again, the knight would fall. In this game, knight c7 is played. If pawn captures pawn, the queen would return to e3. And look at this position. Bishops, queen, one of these points is going to fall. You cannot hold this together. It is a wide open position. Look at this guy. Not having a fun time. This guy here, super cozy, perfect shelter in f2, g3. In this game, no capture on e5. It's knight c7. Pawn takes pawn, knight takes bishop. No recapture just yet. We have a fancy check thrown in, opening up the diagonal. What are you supposed to do here in the game? It's king takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, it's mate. If the king goes to f8, it's a mate in 2. Queen g7 check, and then we would have a nice promotion, double check, mate. In this game, it is king takes pawn, and now we go hunting for the h-pawn. Check. No capture just yet. We would prefer to take with check, so we kick the king to the 7th rank, and only then pick up the pawn. Knight e7. Finally, we get this guy back. Notice there's no fear here by white of some perpetual check. We got the knight in a pin, and we have the e4 square covered, so we don't have to worry about queen e1, queen e4 checks. Things are cool here for white. Black targets the bishop. This opens up the f6 square, though, and white can simply crash through now on the e7 square. After a4, queen takes knight is the final move of this one. Black resigns. If the game continued, queen takes, bishop takes, pawn takes pawn, you save the bishop, and it's there just in the nick of time, preventing b2. And if king takes bishop, you of course advance with your further advanced pawn. White will queen first. All right, in this one, we only go as far as queen takes e7 and black resigns. This was a beautiful positional game by Carlsen. All the more impressive given the brief time control, this rapid format 10+2. It started out primarily with this queenside play, this control over that only open file. At one little tiny move, queen c1, I really liked. Its initial point, save the rook, open up a square for the rook on c2. Who would have thought a little bit later she would have an additional point? After first inserting h4 and h5, pausing there with the pawn, keeping 2 excellent options open with that pawn on h5. And then later, e4, a clearance sacrifice for the queen to pivot on g5, hinting at a sacrifice on g6, or even a capture of the rook on d8, all while the black queen was caught off sides, sticking around defensive role on that b7 square. And only later on, what did that white queen do after a rook exchange? She returns to the c1 square and pokes around on c5. The whole board was made use of in this one. Excellent positional play. What are your thoughts? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.